So the book of Hebrews is a book written about 60 years after Christ's birth, and it was written by someone in the style of Paul from Italy, so it could have been Paul, and it was sent to a group of Jewish Christians or Hebrews, and they were possibly in Israel. We're not sure exactly where they were at the time. What I like about the book of Hebrews is it's a good evangelism tool for the Jewish people, because that's kind of what it was written for. And it's a highlight of the purpose of the events in the Old Testament, the faith that they had and the law and the sacrifices, all that they did, because there was a purpose for why that was there, even though Jesus came to fulfill that and make a new covenant. So the Jews were still kind of having a hard time adapting to what I no longer have to do all those things. How did Jesus replace those things, or how did he fulfill those things? So the author is kind of pointing it out, and he's referencing like 40 verses from the Old Testament as he's guiding them through step by step who Jesus is. And so he's referencing all the important people and traditions and explain how Jesus is the Messiah, the ultimate sacrifice, the king, the high priest, and the atonement for sin once and for all. And the people, the Jewish people, they all had faith in appointed people by God, right? So like Moses or angels that came as messengers, prophets that God spoke through. And so the author is pointing out that Jesus are ranked higher than those people according to scriptures. And he shows them where it says that. And in the first chapter of Hebrews, he says that God in these last days has spoken to us by his Son, and he himself purged our sin, lay down and sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. So he is better than the angels, because who else would God have referred to when he said in the Old Testament, "You are my son, and you're going to sit at my right hand and have all things in subjection under your feet"? Well, that wasn't Moses, that wasn't the angels or the prophets. That is Jesus. He is a higher up. Christ came as the high priest and king. And Jesus didn't need to first offer up sacrifices for himself in order to forgive the sin or sacrifice sin for the people. He himself became the sacrifice. So no longer with blood of goats and calves, but his own blood. And he entered the most holy place once and for all. And having obtained eternal redemption, how much more shall the blood of Christ clean us from our conscience of dead works? And he references, for example, Jeremiah 31:34, with a prophecy in the Old Testament where it says, "The sins and their lawless deeds I will remember no more." Well, there was no one at the time that had the power to do that. So it's referencing what is to come, and it ties it to Jesus. And also in Jeremiah 31, "Behold, the days are coming when I will make a new covenant." And he talks about the faith that they had in the Old Testament, how faith, they were saved by faith too. How Noah built the ark before it had even started raining, or Abraham and Sarah believing in her being pregnant when she got to be in 90s. Or Moses bravely going to rescue his people out of Egypt, and parting the Red Sea, having the faith to believe that with the staff he would be able to part the Red Sea, or walking around the walls of Jericho and they would fall down. Like, there was a lot of faith. So he references that to say, now remember how when Moses led the people out of Egypt and they were going to the promised land, but God made all of them except 2 people to die, and they didn't get to reach the promised land because of their lack of faith during the walk. And he said, don't do the same mistake now. If you don't have faith to believe in Jesus Christ, there's a second place of rest coming. And if you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you're not going to make that either. So he's using all these references to speak to them. And he says, by God, that by Jesus' blood, by his blood, you will be made complete.